Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Walkshow podcast. This is your host, Walker Neer. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week, we're joined by my sister, Michelle, who stopped by to discuss our father. Our dad actually passed away back in 2004, and of course, that had a very significant impact on both of us. And so we just wanted to get together and kind of, for our own purposes, record a conversation just with us, kind of talking about our dad and what he meant to us. And then also for others to hear, we wanted to talk about how we dealt with his passing and just hopefully, offer some insight into kind of what we went through, and maybe someone else can find some help through that. Either way, really, really enjoyed recording the conversation with my sister. And as always, today's episode, the music is produced by Misha Zarins. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Michelle, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining. So, as I talked about in the intro, Michelle is my sister, and we actually have the same dad but different moms. So we grew up in different households, and we're 12 years apart, I think. So a little bit of distance apart, but despite the age difference and despite growing up in different states even, I think we've always been pretty close, which is not something that everyone can say about their siblings. So
Right.
That's pretty cool. And yeah, so when our dad was 54, he passed away, and I was 20. And how old were you when that happened? You don't know for sure? I guess if I was 20, you were 32, because I was 12 years. There you go.
Okay.
So yeah, so pretty young though. I mean, he was 54 and it was pretty young. And so we just wanted to get together and kind of talk about just his life and his ultimately his passing, and kind of how we dealt with that and what that meant to us. And I think that obviously the death of a loved one is something that a lot of people deal with. And I don't know, there's not an easy way to deal with it, but I think that just listening to other people and knowing that you're not alone and someone else has gone through something similar, and it's not the same. It's a unique thing for every person. But there's a way to come out the other side of it and not carry devastation around with you just every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But I wanted to set that premise just so you guys kind of understand where we're going, but we're actually going to rewind from that time and go back to the beginning. So you grew up in Iowa.
Yes.
Right? And how old were you? Do you have any memory of, because Dad left, your dad, Dad and your mom split when you were pretty young. Do you have any memory of him living in the house with you at all?
Some, like, memories are triggered from pictures.
Okay.
Him, several different ones I can think of, but like him holding me. Dad had such big hands, holding me with one hand up above his head, putting me up on the rooftop, holding me in a big mug of beer that was actually a trash can, or like putting me on his motorcycle, him and my mom, with me in the middle riding on the motorcycle, or me in the front. And
yeah, all right.
Well, there's one of
Okay.
him, he's like grabbing his head,
Mm-hmm.
like
That's an expression he made dealing with me
yeah, like
often.
I can't deal with this,
Yeah.
and we're carving a jack-o'-lantern. But I think I can remember a time when I was in grade school. This would have been after they separated. after Dad was remarried to your mom.
Yeah.
I can remember a time when he came to pick me up from school and he was in his VW van. It was powder blue. And he was carrying a brown paper bag, probably the smallest size that they make of that. But at that age that I was, it seemed huge. And it was just overflowing out of the top of candy.
Oh.
Something my mom would have hated.
Yeah.
But he came to pick me up from school with that bag of candy, and I get in the VW bus or van, whatever you want to call it, and you sit right on top of the motor of those things.
Yeah.
And he took me to wherever,
Right.
probably Uncle Marvin's. And
Right. Huh. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, he was always good about setting up surprises like that. Like I remember one of my favorite memories is I was over at his house. It was after him and my mom split when I was 8, so similar kind of deal. Didn't grow up in the house with him on a daily basis, but I was over at his house on a weekend, on like a Saturday night, and typically if we were going to do chores, that would be like a Saturday morning thing. But the Saturday night routine was he's gonna cook food or have a meal of some sort ready. We're gonna eat. Then we're gonna sit on the couch and watch HBO because there was always a movie, like the new movie of the week or whatever came out on Saturday. So we'd watch that. If boxing or something was on, we'd watch that. But we would just kind of hang out. And so this particular Saturday, he was like, we got done eating and we're sitting on the couch, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to vacuum for me?" And I was like, "Not particularly," because I've been me since I was a tiny child, as you are well aware. So I was like, "No," and he was like, "Really? Like, I make you this meal, I provide all these things for you, and you can't vacuum when I ask you to?" And I was like, "I just think it's weird on a Saturday night that I would have to do it. Like, maybe tomorrow morning, like." This is like the chill time, like, why are you, and as you well know, it's not like he was a clean freak. So where is this coming from? Why are you punking me?
Right.
And he just wouldn't let up. He just,
well, and you had to argue because it was you.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a young man at that. I was a kid, but anyway. And so he just lays the guilt on thick. And so finally I was like, fine. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm the worst son ever. I'll go vacuum. Go open the closet where the vacuum cleaner is, and there's a Super Nintendo in there.
Right.
The whole thing was a ruse to get me to open the closet. And so I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, like, really? And then he was like, that took so long. But then also classic me, where I can't be sure what's happening. I go, do I still have to vacuum? And he was like, no, you never had to. And I was like, oh, okay. Thank God. So.
Yes.
But yeah, so just like the candy thing just made me think of that, because he was just always really good about setting up little things that would be very pleasing for you, as a kid. Well, so you're a pretty small child when he leaves, and then he lived in California for a while, and you visited him out there. Do you have memories of that?
I do. I can remember every time that I would go there, we would get up super early, go seashell hunting on the beach, feed the seagulls, and then we would go to Jack in the Box Taco on the way home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I can remember that. Meeting people that he was friends with there, some Vietnamese guys, and
there was like 3 brothers or something.
Yeah, Tom, Ba, and Wa.
There you go. Yep.
And I can flash back to some pictures that I've seen there, and I mean, he was so handsome. He looked seriously like a movie star in some of the pictures.
As the listeners of the show know, apple doesn't fall far from the tree, folks. I'm kidding. Anyway, yes, no, well, yeah, that's what my mom always said about him, is like, he was like ripped, and like even his friends when I was a kid would talk about like how he was just like really built muscularly.
Yeah.
Which was surprising, because as a kid he was like a scrawny little kid that got beat up all the time and
struck with polio.
Yeah, I always forget about that. That's so crazy. Anyway, I just completely
Yeah.
overran you, but
No. But I would go out there with his mother, Grandma Glennis,
hmm
and I think I probably went a few times on my own, but a lot of times I would go with her because, of course, she wanted to see him,
sure.
and I can totally get that.
Yeah, right. Um, and so eventually he moved. So you grew up to be clear, in southern Iowa,
Hmm.
and eventually he and my mom ended up here in Springfield, Missouri. Um, and so then obviously you continued to come and visit then.
Yes, I would come like 2 weeks in the summer, and usually during fall or winter break, I would come during that time, and then I mean, all of a sudden, there was a baby boy in the picture.
Right,
A
right.
little brother.
Yeah, what a joyous occasion. Um,
No, I was a proud sister.
yeah, no, you've always been. Yeah, I mean, I literally tell, and I'm not saying this to flatter you because you're here. Anyone that's met me before and has heard me talk about you, I mean, I just tell people all the time, you're literally the nicest person that I've ever known in my entire life. Uh, and you've always been super, super awesome as a sister to me. So, uh, from my earliest memories, I remember
Aw,
going to Iowa and hanging out with you when you were a teenager, and
right,
I was like 4 or 5 or something.
right.
Yeah, that had to be fun.
When I graduated high school,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a sweet little picture. I bent down on my knees to get down on your level and give you a hug, and so then you got down on your knees.
Well, and
It's
then
too cute.
when you got married, and to be clear, that picture you're just talking about, I'm
Okay,
like,
wait, before we
oh,
get to
oh,
that, I
oh,
gotta say,
okay,
back on my graduation, I remember Dad came in for my graduation, and the night before, I was out on the square with my friends, and
okay,
of course, we were drinking, whatever. We actually were driving around this POS car that had the roof cut off, and Dad went by on the square, and I hollered at him, and he got out and came with me, and we took a little joyride in that car. So that was a sweet little memory.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool. That is cool. The only story I was going to share is just that yet again, Walker not understanding what's happening. So you kneel because I'm tiny and I think I'm supposed to kneel.
Yes.
And then when you got married, we're walking down the aisle and we have to say, he says her mother, brother, and I give her away or something
Right.
like that.
Yes.
Which is like a traditional wedding saying. It's not like you guys are the only ones that
Well,
said that.
it's not traditionally including the brother, but that's
Sure.
just the way I wanted to do it.
Gotcha. See, yet again, a very loving sister. So yeah, and I started bawling. And now, to be clear, the other picture I'm like 4, so it's excusable that I didn't understand. But in this time, I'm like 10 or 11. Like I'm old enough
Right.
that I should understand.
Mhm.
I thought you were gone. I thought we just straight up were
Gave me
like,
away.
yeah, see ya. Good knowing you. Even though I knew your husband. I mean, I've known your husband for the whole time.
Yep.
I mean, our dad set you guys up, so
Right.
I literally knew him from the beginning.
Right.
And I knew where you lived. I didn't. I don't know. I got very panicked.
Okay, so since you mentioned that,
Yeah.
that is got to be the proudest thing. And it is definitely when someone says, "So how'd you and Brad meet?" I'm just like, I beam.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding? You really want me to tell that? Like,
Yeah.
that is my favorite story to tell.
Nice.
That Dad went to him at work and said, "Hey, my daughter just moved into town. Was wondering if you might want to take her out." And Brad said, "Nah, I'm good." But
To Brad's credit, if a 40-year-old man approached me when I was 20 at work and was like, "Hey, my daughter just moved down," like,
well,
something's
yes.
got to be wrong because no one's doing like this. Isn't the way it goes.
And Brad said he just pictured a female Mike.
Right.
So the glasses. He said, coming from Iowa, she was corn-fed, all those things. But then, good friend of Dad's, Charlie Reichard,
Yeah.
went to him and said, "I heard Mike ask you to take his daughter out.
Yeah.
You gonna do it?" And he's like, "No." And he said, "Well, I think if you saw her, you'd change your mind. So then Brad, runs to Dad and was like, hey, you still want me to take your daughter out? And he goes, it's no big deal. I just thought she just moved to town. I thought you might
Yeah.
just show
Same
her around.
age.
Right.
Right.
So the rest is history.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that morning, the morning before Brad took me out, I was working overnights. I came home from work at 6. Dad waited up for me because he got off probably at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So he waited up for me, and he said, let's go down and play ping pong. So we went to the basement, played a game of ping pong, and he goes, well, tonight's the night you find out if you're getting married or not.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
The first date.
Right.
Wow. Which is funny because later, when it actually did turn into you guys were going to be married and all this, he was like, I never imagined that. I just thought I was setting him up to show around town or whatever. I didn't think that was my future son-in-law. You know what I mean? Like, but then here he is the morning of the first date talking about wedding bells. So whatever, he's full of it. So eventually then, so you graduate like you said, and then pretty much right after that you moved down to Springfield to live with him
2
and
years.
me and my mom.
Mm-hmm.
2 years after you graduated?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that long.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at one point you went to Arkansas. Was that before or after?
That was as soon as I graduated. Like
Okay.
the summer that I graduated. It was just for 3 months.
Okay. So then you moved in with us, and I have a...
Okay, so why I was in Arkansas,
Yeah.
I was driving back to Springfield one time, and the clutch went out of my car. And this was before cell phones,
Right.
and I am like a wreck. I'm bawling because you're coming up the hills in Arkansas, and, my clutch is going out. I can't gas it or anything. People are honking at me, flipping me off, and I am just like in a panic. I get to a convenience store. I probably had to make a toll-free call to Dad.
Yep.
He gets Uncle John. They get a trailer and come to the convenience store to pick me up and my car. They walk in, and I'll never forget, I was in such a state of freaking out. I don't even know how long, if it was an hour or 3 hours or whatever. But I look up, and these 2 guys are coming toward me. And I just think to myself, I don't need this right now.
Right.
But it was Dad and Uncle John, and they were there to rescue me, and it was wonderful.
Oh man, that's good. That's so good. Yeah, he was such a generous person in that way. I remember we were driving one time. I was probably like, I don't know, 12 or 13, maybe not that old, but whatever. I wasn't a tiny kid, but I wasn't like a teenager, in high school yet. And we're driving down the road, and it's snowing like super hard outside. And there's this woman walking by herself along West Bypass, which, for those of you not familiar with that, it's a kind of a major thoroughfare. It's not a side street that people walk up and down, really. And it's, again, straight blizzarding. And yeah, he saw her and instantly just pulled over and was just like, hey, like, it's just me and my son. I can give you a ride. Where are you trying to, you know what I mean? Just like, he just would see people like that, and he would just react.
Well, I don't know if I ever told you, but before I was born, it was a pretty cold Iowa winter, and my Aunt Janet didn't have a winter coat.
Mm-hmm.
And she got one through a charge, and this was back when not a credit card, but
layaway, right?
Yeah. And it was really cold. She didn't have the coat. Dad went and paid the bill.
Yeah.
And took the coat to her.
Yeah.
and she has never forgotten that.
Yeah, I didn't know that story. I mean, I did today, but I didn't when he was around still. It was actually at his funeral in Iowa that I think they asked people to stand up and tell stories, and she stood
Right.
up and told
Yeah.
that story, and I
Yeah.
was just blew my mind.
I
Like,
think she still, well, at that time, she still had the paid in full ticket.
oh man,
Mhm.
yeah, that's yeah, yeah, and that's just I mean that's just the kind of dude that he was. He was just a very generous and just kind of warm person. Um, I don't know, which is funny because he also had this like super ironic, super sarcastic, called me partneroo and all these silly names all the time. And
A temper and a flash.
yeah, but he did, but it was like, it was just, I mean, it was just that flash though. Like he wasn't a vindictive person. You know what I mean? Like he would get super mad sometimes. And he wasn't always good about saying sorry, but he would always try and make it right somehow. You know what I mean? Now, eventually, I got to an age where I was like, you can't get me a video game this time, dude. Like, you actually just have to say you're sorry. Like, sorry, but that's the only thing I'm going to take. And he'd be like, all right, fine, and, But but anyway, so yeah, so that's what I was gonna. So what was it like? So when you're growing up, you're seeing him a few times a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then you move with him after a couple years of high school. So what was that like to live with him? Was it what you expected? Was it not what you expected?
Hmm.
Is it not really that big of a deal, and it was just kind of a something to get through to move on to the next phase of your life?
I
Or
think I was there, let's see, April, May, June, July, August, September.
oh, okay,
I was, yeah, like 5 months.
pretty brief.
Yes.
Okay,
The tension between your mom and I was kind of hot.
yeah,
And I'm happy to say now that we're better friends than we ever were.
sure,
So,
yeah.
but
I've had some tension with my mom before too. Love you, mom. She, if she was on the pod, she'd say the same thing. So.
but I don't know. I remember I had not been there very long,
Mhm.
maybe 3 weeks. I had brought some wine coolers with me, and Dad found them down in my room, and it was like I committed murder. He found them and he picked them up, and that was when they came in well, they still do come in a cardboard 4-pack, but he picked them up and the bottom broke out from underneath it, and the bottles went and busted, and liquor was everywhere, and he just got more irate.
Mhm.
And was like, I can't believe you brought these in here. What if you had been watching Walker when you were drinking these and whatever?
Oh,
I'm
that's
like,
rich.
geez, Dad.
Whatever, man. Yeah, whatever, man. They used to party plenty, so
Right.
get out of my face with that
Oh,
nonsense.
yeah. They
Yeah.
would even tell me about all the times that, Dad and Aunt Bev and Uncle Marv and Uncle John were down in the basement, and they come up and they're all just laughing hysterically, and their
Right.
eyes are red.
Right, and there was no jokes told. Right. Yeah, they didn't watch
And
a
it's
comedy
freezing
special.
cold down there. What
Right.
the hell are you doing?
Uh-huh. I know. I never realized that's what was going on.
That was in the house of Jefferson.
Well, it was also true at the house that you lived at with us, because like, you remember where your bedroom was downstairs, and then next to that was like the unfinished cellar part.
Yeah. The canning room.
I am certain that that's what was going on in that room the entire
Yeah,
time.
the weed smoking room.
Yeah, but no one told me. No one, not that they would have, because I was a child, but I just never put that together at all. Or like, he would go out in the garage and like, quote unquote, like work on stuff. And I just, again, I'm a dumb kid, so I don't, and maybe a dumb person in general, but I don't understand what he's doing. But I just assume that there's like an ongoing project that needs his attention daily. Turns out he just had a pipe and a little sack back there, and that was the attention that was needed, which is all good. I'm not mad at him. I just didn't know until much later in life.
Yeah, and hey, I'm glad that he was able to share that with his siblings for his whole life.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. And and it's not like he was, I mean, if someone's going to abuse a drug, or abuse, maybe it's strong wording, whatever, if they're going to use a drug, I'll take weed pretty much any day of the week for the drug you're going to do. Like, it would have been way different if he would have been going out there to do lines of coke or something. Like
Sure.
that's a different childhood that I had at that point. So so I'm happy with it. It's fine.
Hey, let's talk about what a great cook he was.
Oh man, it was. Well, I mean, once the cooking channel came out, he was
expanded,
hooked on it. But even before, I remember there was a show when I was a little kid called The Frugal Gourmet, where he and my mom would watch every Saturday morning and then cook whatever that guy made, or
well,
the recipes
I
were.
mean, okay, so I can picture you sitting in an old wooden high chair, and he is cooking, let's say tacos, and they had a way, and your mom was right there too. They had a way of mixing the hamburger and the refried beans together with some seasoning, and then fry the shell. Fry the tortilla shell.
Right, but it's like a soft flour tortilla that they then fry.
Right. And I didn't like them at the time, but today that is what I make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then like I can think of him making gravy and just so much beef and noodles, chicken and dumplings. I mean, things that we make today because we loved having them with him.
Well, every year we celebrate his birthday, and yeah, just this year I came out to your place and we made chicken and dumplings.
Right.
It did break my Instant Pot, which I actually found out the root cause of that, which isn't important for right now. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I remember. I mean, yeah, he always. I mean, like I said, every Saturday was pretty much. He would wake up Saturday morning, go to the grocery store pretty early in the morning. I mean, not like 5 a.m., but like 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere in there, and buy whatever he was going to get. I remember us having tri-tip steak a lot, which was super really spicy and really good. I remember him doing ribs, and it's the only time I thought it was normal, because you always think whatever happens in your house is normal when you're a kid. But we would have ribs, and so we would have rib napkins, which were just hand towels because it's so saucy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I remember having ribs somewhere else and being like, we have appropriate napkins for this, and it's like,
and his hamburgers were like 2 inches thick.
Oh yeah, insane. It's surprising that we didn't get sick from that, because there's no way they were cooked on the middle. They couldn't have been.
No, I can remember one time specifically that Brad cut into it and he was like, it was pink, and he looked at me and just shook his head like, I'm not.
Yeah, right.
But his spaghetti sauce, and he would make these things, and he would make enormous amounts and then freeze them.
Yeah.
To where even after he passed, I had a couple of containers of frozen foods.
I held on to a container of chicken and dumplings for a year.
Really?
It took me. I couldn't ever bring myself to do it because I knew it was the last meal I had from him.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do it. But then it got to a point where it was like, well, it's just going to go bad at some point, I think. So I need to eat it eventually. So I did.
Well, my kids can remember that in the chicken and dumplings, he would always put an egg.
Right.
And then, like, whoever got the egg, got the golden egg.
Right.
And then they also remember his famous appetizer, which was a jar of Tostitos cheese sauce.
Just finished a jar of that a week ago.
Yeah.
I still like it. Yeah. Yeah, no, his cooking was always something he was so into. The one that stands out to me, and I don't know why, because I'm pretty sure he only made it once. I think it was just because it was so bizarre, but it was popcorn cake.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah. Actually, I have that recipe at home, and it has some handwritten notes of his on there. Yeah.
Huh. But I'm pretty sure that was like a cooking channel thing.
Yeah, it was. It was Emerald's, maybe.
Oh, okay.
And it had like M&Ms in it.
Yeah.
And peanuts.
Yeah. But yeah, that was like...
He was proud of that.
That was when Rachel Ray was still like... I mean, now she's like a huge celebrity in that world, but back then she was hardly anyone yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder where he would be, because now, I mean, back then there was like the cooking channel, but now with the way the internet is, I mean, can you imagine him on Pinterest?
No.
With recipes? I mean, he'd go crazy.
Yeah.
He'd go crazy.
Yeah, and okay, so rewind.
Yeah.
Back to when I was little visiting him in California.
Mm-hmm.
There is a picture of him and I cooking together.
Yeah.
there, and he's got on the sweatband and I've got on a sweatband, and we're in his old cast iron skillet, we're
Right.
cooking up something.
I think actually there's a similar picture of me at the Jefferson house from when I was a little kid, where he's cooking something over the stove, and I'm standing next to him watching, or on a
Yeah.
chair or something.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually learning to cook. It was
He
some...
was the better cook between you and your mom. He
I'll
was the
stand up.
better
I
cook.
will stand up for my mom. She can cook some fire stuff. I still basically copy her spaghetti recipe to a T, and it's hard for me to eat spaghetti sauce almost anywhere else because it's
Oh,
just not. Everyone else makes it too sweet,
yeah.
and hers is nice and spicy, and that's what I'm into. But yeah, no, he was an excellent cook, and he just really enjoyed doing it. It was just something that he really,
Yeah, a passion.
yeah, took a lot of pride in, and thought was it was almost like an art for him, like
Mhm.
just I think a creative expression in some ways. Well, so, and this might be kind of a weird question, so you're welcome to just say that's a weird question. I don't know, but um, especially transitioning from seeing him somewhat infrequently as a little kid to then moving to the same town where he lives. And again, it's kind of a weird question, but like, how did you think of the relationship? And maybe it's not, maybe at the time you're a kid, so you don't know, but now thinking back, like, did he seem like a dad, like a parent? Did he seem more like a buddy? Like, how did he come across to you?
Okay, so definitely visiting in California, but then also in Springfield when I was just coming to visit. Definitely a dad, because I was in junior high and high school, and he was, even though I wasn't with him a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him on the phone every Sunday night.
Oh, okay.
But my mom would talk to him prior to me talking to him, and he would always scold me on, whatever I had, what
Right.
kind of mischief I had been into that week, or
Yeah.
whatever, my grades, boys. I'll never forget one time him getting on to me in a way that hurt me, not physically, but
Sure.
just emotionally, about boys one time when I was at the house on Jefferson. And yeah, I can remember the conversation in my head.
Wow.
Um, but when I moved to Springfield to live with you guys,
Yeah.
probably more of a buddy type thing.
But you're an adult then too, so
Yeah. But also, your mom and I did not get along, and I can remember him telling me point blank, and maybe it was before this time, but I just remember him saying, "I love you in a way that I will never love her, but I love her in a way I will never love you." And that kind of, was a defining moment for me, that I was his only daughter.
Yeah. Yep.
That was special.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because, obviously I had a different experience, even though they divorced when I was 8, I lived with him full time until I was 8 years old. And then even after that, even when they divorced, they stayed in the same city, and they didn't really do the custody fighting stuff. So the arrangement was technically that I was supposed to go to his house every other weekend, but really I went over there almost every weekend, most
Yeah,
of the
that's what I thought.
time, so I wasn't limited on seeing him. So it didn't, is as much as I was obviously very aware that they were divorced, it didn't really feel like he was not in my life at all still. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It was pretty normal as that kind of thing can be.
I don't think that there was, a lot of times when couples get divorced, it's because they want to do other things or see other people, but there was never a time that Dad didn't want to be with you.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he was, I mean, I feel bad sometimes because when I talk about him with people, I always explain him as my best friend, and he was that. But I feel like I downplay um, him him being a dad as well and being that father figure. I mean, he definitely had conversations with me trying to instill different values, and I remember when I was real little, like just going into kindergarten, him telling me, like you might encounter a bully, and if you do, like don't let him see you sweat, and just never punch someone first, but if you get attacked, like you have to defend yourself, and I don't know, just little things like that I think dads tell their kids pretty generally. um and always super supportive. I mean, as listeners will know from recent episodes, I've struggled with my weight for a long time as an adult, but that actually started when I was a kid. I mean, I actually was only thin until about the time they got divorced. And I don't think I gained the weight because I was depressed. It was more that, like, I had to go to, because they worked opposite shifts. In the summertime, the way it would work is I would be at my mom's house in the evening, and then I'd go to bed, and then he would show up at 2 in the morning when he got off work, take me to his house, and then I would wake up, except he sleeps until noon or whatever, but I'm up at like 8. So I was just really bored, you know what I mean? So I think I just started eating a lot because I was bored. But anyway, so I was pretty overweight for a lot of my childhood. And then when I got into high school, I grew a whole bunch and got thin, probably only because of that. Should have kept growing. But anyway, he would always tell me that, like when I was clearly overweight, like if he saw me now, if he was still around now, he would still tell me that I'm not overweight. Like he would still try and tell me, like, nothing's wrong, like everything's fine, man, you're great, you're doing great, and it comes from a place of, like, he just always wanted me to be confident in myself or love myself, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's a parental type of thing. I mean, yeah, friends do that too, but he was doing it as the dad or whatever. So um but I will say that, I mean, I tried to give a eulogy when he passed, and the eulogy was about, I don't know that anyone understood it because I was just sobbing the whole time, but what it was supposed to be about was that that's the one relationship he has in common with everyone, is he's their friend. Whether he's your brother, your dad, your coworker, whatever he is, he's always the friend. Like, that's just the personality he had, and that ties into the buying the coat on layaway, right? Or infinite stories you can come up with where that's just who he was. Um, and yeah, so for me, like, he was just that. I mean, when I was a real little kid, he would come when I was in school, all the way up through junior high. It didn't happen in high school ever, but all the way up through junior high, and not monthly or something, like literally once a year probably, but he would show up at the school and be like, go to the office and tell them that we had family in town and I had to go, and then take me out of school, and then we would go fishing. There was never
Right.
family in town,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So it was like the ultimate hookup because I hated school. It was like prison to me. So it was so cool that he was rescuing me. Um, and yeah, he was just that character. I mean, when I was a little kid, I would have to go to bed at 10 at night, we'll say, and he
Which
would
is
come
late.
back in, huh?
It's late.
Yeah, well, I don't mean like 4. I mean like 8, 9, 10. I don't know. Ugh, ugh. I would be such a bad parent. 'Cause you're like, yeah, you stay up till 3, dog, with me. Let's do it. Just like him, right? Like I would just be like him. Not that he was a bad parent, but I would be just like him. Well, so at 10, I would go to bed, but then at 11, he would come check on me, and if I was still awake, he would get me back out of bed,
Mhm.
and then we would go in the living room and play NBA Jam together, which was like my favorite thing that we could possibly do. So it turned into a thing where he would put me to bed, and I would come up with the most elaborate games that I could think of to make myself stay awake,
Sure.
so that by the time he
Oh
shows back up,
no.
I can get up and play again. Um, but yeah, it's those kinds of things that I cherish so much. Just I don't know, just the cool little hookups like that. Um, we used to go fishing all the time. That was super cool. He would get mad at me sometimes. I remember one time I fell in the pond. I kept trying to set the hook on the fishing pole, and every time I would set the hook, I would step backwards, which is not a requirement of moving your arms. And so then he said, "Stop stepping. You're gonna," because we're on a dock, and he's like, "You're gonna step off the dock." And I was like, no, I won't. Don't talk to me about this. And then 5 minutes later, step off the dock and fall in the water.
Sure.
So he gets very upset. So I fall in the water and then immediately feel this hand just snatch me up out of the water. But he had just had knee surgery like 3 weeks before that.
Oh,
That's
no.
why we were fishing, because he was on vacation.
Uh-huh.
But he had to get on his knees to get me.
Uh-oh.
And I was surprised. I was like, I'm not sure why you rescued me based on the response that you're giving me right now. Like, he was so mad. But I think it just scared him. You know what I mean?
I remember that knee surgery because I remember him saying, my knee feels like it has a fever. Let's take the temperature. And we had one of those tapes that you put across your forehead, and we
Yeah.
put it across his knee, and it did. It had a fever.
Yeah, I don't actually know what happened. I know when he was a little kid, he like slid on a baseball field and hit his knee on a rock,
Mm.
and then it was bad forever. But the knee he had surgery on when I was a kid was the other knee.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if he just
So
twisted
he
it.
had it on both knees. Now, the one from his childhood had that huge scar all the way
Right.
across it. And then the other knee had just like 3 little laparoscopic
Right,
cuts.
right. Yeah, because that was by the time they had cameras, little
Right.
tiny cameras to do the surgery with. Huh. So then, you've moved down here, you get married,
Yeah.
as we talked about, and then
You
have...
gave me away.
Right, yeah, we gave you away, tried to get rid of you. Didn't even get any goats in return or anything, like you're supposed to do when you give these people away. And then along comes your children. You have 3 beautiful children, Clale and Grace, and I remember, like, that's really when I remember being around you the most. Like, I mean, I remember you being around prior to that, and like I remember when you guys got married, and I remember going and staying with you when I went to basketball camp in the summer for like a week, and you would pick me up and take me back out to your place before you had kids or anything.
Right.
So not that I didn't spend time with you, but like once you had the kids, it was like you were, it seems like there was a period where you came over maybe every week.
I had more motherly instincts. So I tried to use those on my little brother as well.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But I remember like you guys would come over, I think on Thursdays, and which is crazy that I would remember that. What's even more weird is that I think the trigger for me to remember that is because that was the night that ER was on. And you guys always had to leave in time to get home for ER.
Right.
It's so weird that I would remember that. Anyway, but yeah, is that in your... To me, that seems like that's when you guys became the closest.
Yeah, because Brad was working nights, and so he didn't get off till like 2 a.m.
Right.
But we would come over for dinner, and we would stay until, time to get home. So it'd take us about 30 minutes to get home.
Yeah.
And when we'd get home, the kids would be asleep. I'd have to carry them all in.
Right.
And then I would call Dad because he wanted to know, of course, when we got home.
Yeah.
And I have to go lock up the chickens. And so I would always talk to him as I went out to lock up the chickens, because otherwise I would walk out there, and then as soon as I got the door shut on there, I would get scared and I'd run all the way back. So having him on the phone, I totally felt protected.
Right. Yeah. So I like I said, that's my memory of you guys becoming the closest. And so you because then when I eventually got into high school, and you guys would go to my basketball games with him and watch those. And then it was probably sometime in the last couple of years of my high school that he was diagnosed with alcoholism, which you and I have had obviously many conversations about this, but I didn't realize that was a thing. Like, I think when people hear about something like that, it seems like it would be super obvious. But in his case, like, he really only drank at night and was completely, like, when you came over, it's not like he was sneaking shots in or something.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't like that.
Mm-mm.
So I just had no idea. And yeah, I remember him being diagnosed with that and going into like a detox and then like a rehab type system, and just kind of trying to fight that for a long time. I remember you were really heavily involved, taking him to doctor's appointments and that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, eventually that kind of caught up to him. And in 2004, he called me one day and said that he uh, couldn't couldn't get up to get a drink of water, and so he asked me if I would go over to his house and get him a cup of water, which is a pretty crazy request, right? So I went
Right.
over there, and sure enough, he couldn't get up. I tried to help him stand, with me propping him up, and that didn't work. So we took him to the hospital, called 911, which he wasn't happy about, but I didn't know what else to do. So he went to the hospital, and that was on a Friday, I think.
This was in July.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then on that Sunday, that was that Sunday he passed. And I was 20, and I just didn't know it could happen, like I was just talking to you before we started recording about this a bit, but I just I just didn't know. Like, I just didn't nothing in my life had ever been taken from me in that way. And there's, anyone that's dealt with someone passing before will know that it's just an incredibly final thing. And not that I had never known anyone that had passed. I mean, both of his parents passed away when I was alive, so I'd seen that. But I didn't know them as well, and it wasn't that depth of relationship. And yeah, I was just really, really shocked. And and yeah, it was the single most devastating thing that I've ever dealt with, and the most single significant thing, good or bad, that ever happened to me. I don't know anything else that even kind of compares. Um, but yeah, I know it's hard, but what was that like when you saw that? Because you were a little older and you had been a little more
Well,
plugged into the truth of it than I was.
yes, because when he spent a week in the hospital in April
Mm-hmm.
prior to his death,
Mm-hmm.
um, like we were just discussing, we had the conversation about him not wanting help with the alcoholism. Therefore, I knew that meant he was going to go back to drinking as soon as he got home.
Right.
It wasn't as soon as he got home, but it was within a couple weeks.
It was inevitable.
Yes.
Right.
And in that time, I would take him to doctor's appointments where they would draw blood. And then the next week, take him in for a blood transfusion. And then back to a doctor's appointment to draw blood. And then blood transfusion. And it was an endless cycle.
Yeah.
And when I got the call from you that you were he was going by ambulance,
Yeah.
the kids and I and Brad's mom had just got back from a wedding reception. I came by myself to the hospital. That was a Saturday.
I feel like it was a Friday, but
Okay.
I don't know
Well,
why I
all
would
I
know
know
these
is
dates. So
Clay's birthday was then 2 days later.
yeah.
And it was, yeah, it was a short amount of time, but I remember the two of us being outside of his hospital room because
Mm-hmm.
we were kind of changing shifts,
Yeah.
and they gave a code blue.
Right. Right when I
And
got there.
yeah, it was like 20 people charged the room,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he was in ICU for
Yeah, he never was conscious again after that.
right.
That evening. Yeah. Yeah, and that's it's so strange for me to think back on it now, because even then, even then, I still like it literally it wasn't real to me until I was in the room and watched it happen.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking was, so from April to July, I had in my head, Dad's gonna die.
Yeah.
I need to be prepared.
Yeah.
But in thinking that you are prepared, even to the moment of when we're standing outside the hospital room and all those people charge in, you're not prepared at all. You're
Right.
not prepared for that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you could be. Because when someone's that precious to you, it's just, I don't know. It's just, you just don't think it's going to go that way. You just don't, especially at that age, for me, like I said, just very naive. And yeah, and it was something that was, I mean, it was devastating to me for a very long time. We did his funeral, and it's funny because I associate all this music with him, and I don't know that it's even music that he listened to. Uh, but he's from, like his youth was in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
And I knew he liked that genre of music, we'll say 70s rock, which is a very broad term. And like I remember listening to like Freebird,
Yeah.
which the lyrics are like, if I leave here tomorrow, will you still remember me?
Right.
Which seemed incredibly relevant for that
Yeah.
that moment. And so I listened to that song a ton, and other music as well. And then, I mean, it was a year probably after his passing where, if that song came on, I was done. I was spent. I would start crying uncontrollably, and not even just that song. It was just any time it could hit. I could just be having a normal conversation, and something would happen, or some thought would enter my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and bam,
Right.
and here it is, Or,
I was the same way. I would call my mom
mm-hmm,
crying uncontrollably for
mm-hmm,
like up to a year
yeah,
afterward.
yeah,
And she said, You really need to go see a counselor." And I was against it. She worked at a hospital at the time. And when I went home, when I went to Iowa for a visit, she said, "I made you an appointment. I
yeah,
want you to speak to this guy when you
yeah,
were there." And it wasn't until that time, because I was able to tell him things that I didn't want to tell Brad,
right,
because I didn't want him to feel any certain way about Dad.
yep,
I didn't want to tell her because of the same reason, that
yeah,
I just didn't want to voice to anyone else because I
yeah,
didn't want him judged.
right,
But things that I needed to let go of.
right.
And after that, I just felt so much better. So I'm saying that because if anyone hears this and wonders if that would be beneficial to them,
Yeah,
give it a try.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, in hindsight, I totally should have done that. I just didn't. I didn't know.
Well, I was forced.
Yeah,
But I'm thankful.
right, right. This is kind of a weird story to share because it's about the night of his passing specifically, but it's strange to me how it and maybe I cut short too quickly us talking about his life, so I didn't mean to do that if I did. Um, but like another thing I want to share about that, and so just be clear, you're welcome to do that as much as you would like as well. We're not only on this topic now, but like when I was a kid, we would literally just turn the TV on, and he would just put a channel on and make fun of whatever was on, and then change the channel and then make fun of that, and then change the channel and make fun of, and like, and I'm just dying laughing the entire time. You know what I mean? Like it is
Yeah.
hilarious. And so like I attribute my sense of humor, which anyone that knows me knows that I at least think I'm funny. Whether I am or not is
Of course.
another story, but I think I am.
Yes.
So I'm going to try. And I think that so much of that comes from him. I mean, my mom is funny too, but in more of like an ironic, like she'll be ironic about things. Whereas he was just like, I mean, sometimes he would do voices, sometimes he would, like, I'd be on the phone with a friend of mine, and it's going to sound, I actually just can't tell that story because it's going to sound too weird without knowing him, but he would just say very inappropriate things to my friends, we'll say. That in 2019 would not be okay. And probably weren't in 1998 either, but yeah, I mean, we just all, like, everyone that knew him thought he was hilarious. I had a girlfriend in high school I dated for like 5 years, starting in high school and then after that. And she just adored him. I mean, she thought he was, because he charmed her way more than I knew how. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just anyway, but just his sense of humor was so strong, and it was like even in the night, even in the night when I literally stood in a room and watched him go. I go home and a buddy of mine is there. 'Cause I lived with several guys at that time, and the buddy of mine's there, and he goes, and I go and sit down outside in the backyard, and who knows what my face looked like, and he was like, "You look like you're having a bad day. Like, what's going on?" Because he doesn't know where I just came from. And I go, "Yeah, I just watched my dad die." Which, who says that? Like, who says that to you look like you're having a bad day?
Mm-hmm.
And this dude's mouth just drops open. And he didn't know what to say. And in that moment, like, I laughed because I knew how uncomfortable that had to be for that guy.
Wow. Shame on you.
I didn't say it to make him uncomfortable. That's really what happened. I just recognized objectively after that how weird of a thing that was for me to say. Anyway, but yeah, so the counseling thing is a really great suggestion, and I think maybe you've shared that with me before, but I don't know that I don't know if you wouldn't have told the story again tonight if someone else asked me that I would have said, yeah, she saw a counselor.
Right.
So you felt like after that you were just in a significantly better place. I mean, not that
Yeah.
you're over it or whatever.
Oh, no,
I mean, that doesn't happen in the same
I
way.
felt like the crying that I could not control
Yes.
was done.
Yes. That's the thing. I've known some other people since that time that have had a loved one or specifically a parent that's passed away, and they didn't know how to deal with it. They knew I had dealt with it, and so they've come to me and been like, "What do you do?" And it's a thing where it's like, unfortunately, the grief is going to happen. The pain is going to happen. Like, there is no remedy to not feel badly about it. And that's also a good thing, as crazy as that sounds, because it's like, it means that it meant something. Like, the reason it hurts is because it was worth so much.
Right.
But that's the thing that I always tell them, because they'll come to me pretty soon after it happens, and I say they, like there's these massive people. It's been like 3 people ever. But they've come to me and pretty quickly after been like, how do you deal with it? Like, what do you do? And every time I tell them, like, I can't tell you yet because it's not true yet, but you'll know when you're ready to move on, and when that happens, then come talk to me, and then I'll tell you.
Right.
And it's not that I'm trying to be mysterious or something. It's just literally like, you do have to go through that grief, and you do have to process it and deal with it, and recognize that, like, I mean, you don't ever get that chance again. He's been gone since 2004. I don't know if I told you this. I probably did, because I tell you everything. But I mean, 2 months ago, I'm at work and something stressful happens, and I take my phone out and I dial 886-3881, which was his phone number.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually hit send because I recognized what I was doing before I would do that. And I was just like, that's insane that I remember that number. But B, it's just crazy how long that stuff lingers with you. You know what I mean? Like, how it's just embedded.
Yeah.
I had a high school sweetheart or whatever that I talked about earlier, that he was always charming or whatever. Well, she just straight ghosted me one day and never talked to me again for the rest of my life, right? Even that, though, it's like, well, I mean, to be clear, I don't think this now. I don't know who she is anymore at all, nor do I try to. But my point just being like, I don't know, like she's still around. So if I really, really felt like I needed to do something to resuscitate that relationship, like, and I don't mean the romantic version of it, but just anything, like she's still alive somewhere in the world that I could talk to, if
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
And when someone passes, man, like you just there's none of it, and the rest of the world keeps moving. That was the other thing that was so
Yeah.
shocking. Was like,
Yeah.
for you, it feels like everything has just been like, stop, and then for everyone else, it's not. And it's not that it should be. I mean, not that the world is cruel because of that either. Just
I can remember when the funeral and everything was done, I went to a function at the church that we were attending.
yeah,
It was the end of Bible school, and my kids had a program. And I remember attending that, and I didn't want to attend it with everyone else. I sat up in the balcony because I didn't want people to see me. I didn't want people to talk to me. I didn't want to be in,
mm-hmm.
you know. And one of the girls that I had had previous in Sunday school come up to me and she's like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm
I'm
okay."
okay, right?
And she said, "Yeah, I have had a really hard week. My boyfriend and I broke up." And oh, wow. I didn't give a shit.
Right,
I didn't
right,
want to hear another word.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, for me, it actually was even a weirder thing where since that time, I definitely can cry, but I cry at weird stuff. Like, do you know the song "Fast Car" by Tracy Chapman by chance? I would try and do a little ditty, but it won't. You won't recognize
I
it
don't
from that
know.
either.
Probably.
You would. I'll play it for you after we're done recording here. But anyway, for anyone that's familiar with that song, it's a very popular song from the early '90s, and like this was in the last year. I was at a Walmart. I'm in a Walmart. It's not an emotional event, and that song comes on over the loudspeaker,
You're
which
not supposed to be shopping in Walmart.
yeah, it happens. Our own father shopped there while he worked for the competitor, so whatever. I'm cut from the same cloth. So I usually shop at Price Cutter, by the way. Anyway, once in a while I'll go to Walmart. And anyway, they were playing this song, and I mean, I just started crying. Like, and not to be clear, not over dad or anything, but just like strange things will trigger me to feel very emotional.
Yeah.
But then things that should make me be emotional don't. So dad passed away in July of 2004. Well, my mom's dad passed away in November of 2004. So 4 months later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to you, they put him in the same room that dad was in that hospital. The same room. And I walk into his room, my grandfather's room in the hospital, and he's in the bed, and I lay my head on him to give him a hug. I lay my head on his chest and kind of hug him, and I close my eyes, and I was instantly in dad's hospital
There.
room.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. I started crying and walked out of the room. But I wasn't sad. Like I wasn't appropriately sad about him, you know? Like now eventually I went to granddad's funeral and I did have some emotion there, which I felt good about because I loved him too. You know what I mean? Like he was an important person to me. But it was almost like the devastation that I felt from dad. It was like, what the fuck else could ever compare to this? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. When dad was in ICU, there was also a elderly man in there who was the father of a coworker of dad's,
Oh, okay.
and he passed away like 2 or 3 days after dad.
Yeah.
And then his funeral was maybe a week after dad's,
Yeah.
and I knew I couldn't go to it because
No.
I would sob uncontrollably.
Oh,
Not because of Ralph.
right.
I mean, I knew Ralph, but not on a
Not like
personal
that.
level.
Right.
But I knew I would sob
Yeah.
uncontrollably,
Yeah.
and I could not go.
I felt bad because I could after I went in that hospital room, I had to go. Like it was like panic attack time for me. Like I had to go.
Yeah.
Like I closed my eyes, I was transported back. I had to go. So I did, and I left. And he passed away within a few days of that. And I remember talking to my mom right when he passed, and she was devastated like anyone is if their parent goes, and she was really sad, and I felt so bad because I wasn't there with her, and I wanted to be, like I felt like I should. Now she was with her siblings, so she wasn't alone, but um yeah, I don't know. I think it reshaped me forever in that way. So anyway, I promise I'm not trying to do a teaser. I just ramble, as anyone who listens knows. Um, Earlier, I said the very specific thing and then never said it. So the very specific thing that I came to recognize was that, like I said, I was focusing on his death, and the truth of why that sadness exists is because it mattered so much before that, and so I realized that to truly honor his life and to truly, if I was really going to honor what he meant to me, I was actually doing a disservice to him. I was actually insulting isn't really the right word, but it was almost like I was like compromising our relationship by being sad about it all the time, because our relationship isn't sad. It was really sad one day, but every day before that, it was great.
Yeah.
Every day before that, he's rescuing me from school and taking me from fishing and
Right.
making fun of TV shows and getting a super NES, like it's all that, like, and that's the part that matters. And again, I didn't have that thought or hear someone say that and go, oh, I get it now. I had to sit and meditate and sit and stare at a fucking candle and just think for long hours over and over and listen to Tool and listen to different music and just really work through it. And eventually that's where I came out. And what that taught me that's bigger than that scenario is something else I've talked about on this podcast before, and that's the perception dictates reality. If I perceive that the most significant part of my relationship with him is the fact that he's dead, then the reality is that I am devastated all of the time.
Right.
But if I perceive that the most important part of that relationship was his life, because it is, and that's not devastating, because there's nothing sad about his love and his friendship and his fatherhood, or you know what I mean? Like that's not sad. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know how this will sound, and I promise it's not in some weird thing, but I mean, I would trade anything for him to be back. Like I wish he could listen to the podcast. Like I think honestly, the reason I listened to podcasts and got into all this stuff is because he used to listen to talk radio all the time. Like I would wake up Saturday mornings and he's sitting at the kitchen table reading the paper, having a cigarette, and listening to talk radio. And so it's this kind of interaction, I wish he was around to hear this. Like, and he'd make me feel like $1 million for it. You know what I mean? He'd tell me I was the best podcaster ever, even if he'd never heard another one.
I'd love for him to be a great grandpa.
Yeah. One of your kids Ellen is getting ready to have her own child.
Yeah.
How thrilled would he have been?
And we've talked about, what, like, maybe him and Clay would be roomies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, that would be all right with me.
Yeah. Well, and so I say that because what I'm getting ready to say might make it sound like that's not true, and that's not what I mean. The truth is that you can't change this. Like that's when I say perception dictates reality, like that's the other thing that it showed me was that like sometimes in life things will happen, and death is definitely one of those, where it doesn't matter what you want or what you're willing to do or what you're willing to sacrifice. You can't. There's literally not a negotiation to be had, regardless of the terms you're willing to concede to.
Right.
And so the only thing that is left to change is yourself, because you can't change that. And anyway, so what I'm trying to get to is just that, like, I actually feel like in his death, he actually gave me one last gift, and that is that lesson that perception dictates reality, and the lesson that when you're faced with really, really challenging situations, you actually just have to look inward, and you actually have to look inside to understand how you can either approach it differently or think about it differently or interact with it differently is probably the best way to say it. But that's it, because you can't control everything. And sometimes shit's going to go down that you wish would be different, but it's not. And so then how are you going to deal with that? And again, I don't mean that like I wouldn't give that gift back to have him back, but I can't. And so it's like, I don't know. It was kind of just like one last, like the last flash of him being a dad still, like the last moment that he still gave me something. And that was a really empowering lesson that, frankly, shaped the rest of my life. And like I've talked about, there's times where I'm not able to apply it, like in me trying to lose weight. I struggle there to shift that perception in such a way. So it's not that I've now lived this supercharged, flawless life or something. I still have the same problems that everyone else does. But yeah, it was almost like through that devastation, like he actually found a way to empower me still to like stand on my own again and get back up. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, like I said at the beginning of this show, I mean, I know this is heavy for anyone listening right now, but this is some stuff that people go through, man, and the truth is the truth of life, at least this version of life, and there are some teachings that teach us that there's something beyond this, and I hope that's true. But in this life, it is inevitable that it will end. You actually can't have life without death. It's all one. It's all one cycle. And so I just hope that you guys listening, if you're going through this at all, that you understand that like it's gonna suck really bad, but there's a way out of it. And it's not forgetting, and it's not just time. Everyone always told me it's just
exactly.
time.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
People say, time heals.
No, it doesn't. It's not. I mean, again, I just tried to call the dude.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It gets easier.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that it's, I really think though that it's because of being able to have a different understanding of it. Like, I think it's because you look at it differently. I think if I still looked at it the way I did when it happened, I'd still be crying randomly.
Yeah, you'd react the same way.
Yeah. And it's like, I remember him telling me that, and it was before he got sick even, I think, but we were talking about him passing away sometime, and I was like, that's not going to happen. You're going to be around with me forever. And he was like, no, eventually. I mean, I'm just older than you, it's going to happen. And I was like, no. And I don't want to talk about it because I don't know what I will do if that happens. And he was like, I mean, you'll probably be sad at first, but, time heals all wounds. And it's like, that's a lie.
I remember when my mom's mom passed away. I was a freshman.
Okay.
And Dad sat next to one side of me at the funeral and my mom on the other.
Yeah.
And it was a shock. I mean, it was an extreme shock. She hadn't been sick or anything. And he was hurt too.
Yeah.
My grandma, she didn't have an evil bone in her body. She loved everyone, never said a cross word about anybody.
Yeah.
And I just remember him being there and helping even my mom too through that time, because it was extremely sad.
Yeah.
But like we've said already, that he was just a friend. And
yes, that is exactly who he was. And it was funny because he was the friend that like anyone that knew him wanted to be around him, but he didn't think that was the way it was.
Yeah.
So like there was another guy named Dennis Mabe. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
And so Dennis was the son of the people who owned the Bald Knobbers, which is a show in Branson, Missouri, which is like a hillbilly Las Vegas for anyone not from here. But there's a lot of variety show type things, and so it's a country music / comedy
Yeah.
show. And so Dennis and my dad had worked together, and then Dennis uh, eventually went on to be a performer, be one of the lead singers or whatever, lead musicians at the Bald Dauber show. And I mean, my dad, you'd call him anytime, and anytime I watched them interact, Dennis was like falling over himself to try and tell my dad how much he cared about him.
And here, Dad looked at him as a celebrity.
He did. That's exactly where I'm going. Like Dad would call him and he'd get off the phone and be like, "I feel so guilty every time I call him. He's so busy. He doesn't have time for me." But then you talk to Dennis and he thinks that our dad's crazy for that sentiment. Like, what are you talking about? No, you're my people. Like, you're my guy. I mean, we went golfing together with Dennis. We went on a. This is crazy because this is the only time, but we actually rented a cabin at a lake and went and stayed at a lake for like a week with Dennis and his son and went boating and stuff. And it was fun. You know what I mean? Like, it was cool. But
do you ever think about, like towards, say, the last 6, 4, 3 months of his life, did he know? Did he know that his time was coming?
yeah, he did. All throughout my childhood, I would even even after it was probably I was too old for it to be considered appropriate by most people. I would he would sit on one end of the couch, and I would lay down on the couch and put my head in his lap, and we would just sit, just talk like that or whatever. And I was just something I always did.
That's funny because, see, I would always lay on his chest.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I was too big. So
I can even remember times your mom would be on one side of his chest and I would be on one side of his chest.
The never-ending feud. I'm kidding. But yeah, so I remember kind of close to the time, a few months before he passed, he laid his head down in my lap, which was strange because it's not like it wasn't something that was discussed. It just kind of would happen. And so I'm sitting on the other end of the couch this day, and I'm in high school. Actually, no, I'm not in high school. I'm out. I'm 20. I'm out. And anyway, and he lays his head on my lap, and tells me that he's really afraid to die, that he thinks it's coming, and he's really scared of it. And I was naive, I was a kid, so I didn't think that was really going to happen. I mean, like you said earlier, when you knew in April, 4 months ahead, that it was probably coming and told me that, but my response to you was like, "Oh, nonsense," and that's what I told him when he tried. He was trying to like have a heart to heart with me, and I didn't understand, and I was just like, well, with that attitude, of course, like, come on, turn it around, like, we can fix it. And it was way too late to be fixed at that point. But again, man, I just didn't. When we took him to the hospital that Friday, I didn't think that was the end. I thought,
well, so looking back on those few months, he went to Iowa by himself.
And he had plane, right?
He had not done that in a long time.
Right, because that's where he's from.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
To see his oldest brother.
Yeah.
And then he took just a little weekend trip with John and Gail.
Yeah.
And then Brad and I had been on a mission trip in June. And when we came home, I remember telling Brad, we need to go see if Dad's yard needs mowed. So we went, and I mowed his yard, and Brad was probably weed eating or something.
Right.
The kids were in the house with him. He gave Clay baseball cards. He gave Ellen and Grace the Barbies that his friend Brenda had sent for them to play with, of her daughters. He gave those to them to take home. And I mean, these had been at his house for however long.
Right.
But he did those things. And, after the fact, not on that day, I didn't go home and think, oh my God, Dad's Time
Right.
is near, you know.
Right.
But then after the fact, I thought, that's why he gave him those,
Right.
because he knew.
Right. Yeah. 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 I don't know. Again, it was so hard for me to understand any of it. I wasn't willing to accept it. And it wasn't until it happened. And even after it happened, I don't know if I was willing to accept it, you know? I mean, not for a while at least. Um, yeah, like I said, there's a way on the other side, and it's not a painless road, but there is a road where you don't have to feel hopeless all the time. I don't, and in fact, it's actually, like I said earlier, it's actually, it's the other side of that coin where now I feel like it gave me a lesson, and I feel like it gave me some sort of empowerment, and I feel like, and I hope that this helps someone else, this episode, but I know in my own personal interactions, like I said earlier, with at least those three other people that have come to me, I know it's helped them. So it's a scary time, but it's time that unfortunately is part of the deal. It's part of the deal. Anyway, all that being said, did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss at all? I don't mean to cut you short at all if you had something
Not right
else.
this second.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, Michelle, like I said at the very beginning of us talking, you've been one of my favorite people ever, and you've always been the epitome of what anyone could hope that their sister would be. You were there for me when he was around. You were there for me when he died, and you've been there for me ever since. And I thank you so much for coming on this and talking with me about this, and just thank you for being an awesome sister. I love you so much.
I love you.
You have reached the Mike Neer residence. No one is able to answer the phone right now. Please leave your name, phone number, and a brief message. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. Again, thank you so much, Michelle, for coming and having this conversation with me. It really, really means a lot to me. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Listeners, I hope you guys all found the episode interesting, and hopefully, again, if any of you are dealing with similar stuff, hopefully you can find some insight into, again, kind of how to navigate that, because it's a tough spot, certainly, for anyone to deal with. I hope you guys have a great week. Thanks again for listening.